students, I am Dr. Vimal Rar and today I will bring you the next learning episode in BSc Forensic Science on behalf of the content writers, that is myself and Tulika Banerjee. And this is on an important unit of paper which is Criminalistic, that is Physical Evidence Part 2. In this episode, we will discuss about the electronic evidences in special reference with cybercrime. In addition, we will also learn about the toxicological evidences, that is post-mortem. We would also acquaint ourselves with the identification and collection of toxicological evidences and then preservation, packaging, handling and labeling of evidences which are very important. At last, we will wind up this module with the forwarding of evidence articles to the forensic labs. So, here we will be discussing all these modules, that is module 1 which is electronic evidences in special reference with cybercrime, module 2 which will deal with the introduction to toxicological evidences, that is post-mortem, module 3 which is identification and collection of toxicological evidences, module 4 which will highlight on the preservation, packaging, handling and labeling, will deal with the forwarding of evidence articles, will be conclusion. So, let us begin with this first module which is electronic evidences in special reference with cybercrime. Although technology in general and computers specifically, since their introduction and dissemination into mainstream society have benefited society, there is also a dark side to this technology when abused. In current years, society has seen the rise in abuse of various kinds, such as in personal or private life and also in the corporate sector, conducted with, through or by technology. The existence of data in electronic form is representative of one's activities while working, living and playing in this virtual environment. It creates electronic footprints and an electronic track of our daily lives and activities. The necessity and ability to identify, capture, recreate, display and store all these electronic footprints enable those professionals charged with protecting personal, corporate, governmental security and safety to carry out their assigned responsibilities and to chase those individuals or organization and nation states who utilize the dark side of technology to employ in illegal activities. As computers become more advanced, so do criminal activities. Therefore, the computer forensics function is in constant progression along with the technological advancement of computers. Computers are being used in a variety of roles in the commencement of crime. Each of these roles differ in investigative issues because of the unique attributes of computers and the electronic evidences they hold. Today, there is a requirement for organizations to implement an observant cyber forensic program with appropriate personnel training, engagement policies and applicable procedures is very critical. Let us now look at the definition of cyber forensics. The world of cyber forensic investigation is relatively new and it is evolving, and as such long term standards, protocols, definitions, policies and procedures are emerging as well. They are being defined and redefined. Therefore, agreeing upon a single name for the process has not been globally standardized as of now. But if we still talk about the definition in this slide, cyber forensic is the science related to location, extraction and analyzation of various types of data from different devices which investigators interpret for the purpose of serving it as a legal evidence. Discovery is the preservation, processing, review and production of computer evidence in reaction to civil litigation discovery requirements. The discipline of computer forensic associates elements of science of computer and law with the purpose of collecting and analyzing data obtained from computer systems, networks, wireless communications and storage devices in a manner such that it can be admitted as an evidence in court of law. It can also be referred as the science of locating, extracting, analyzing and protecting the types of data from different devices, especially the electronic devices, which the specialist then interpret to serve as legal evidence. Let us now talk about electronic evidence. Evidence in its purest form is information presented in testimony or in documents that is used to convince the fact finder, that is the judge or jury, to decide the case for one side or the other. Electronic evidence is the information and data of investigative value that is stored on or transmitted by an electronic device. Such evidence is acquired when data or physical items are collected and stored for examination purpose. Electronic evidence is often latent in the same sense, just like our fingerprints or the DNA evidence. Talking about electronic evidences, they can transcend borders with ease and speed. It is fragile and can be easily altered, damaged or destroyed, and it is sometimes time sensitive. So, evidence might have a margin of error associated with it, and the output must always be verified. A first responding officer, that is auditor, law enforcement professional, human resource directorate, etc., they may be responsible for the recognition, collection, preservation, transportation or storage of these electronic evidences. Thus, knowledge of even the elementary rules governing the collection, preserving and safeguarding of evidence is critical. A greater in-depth knowledge of the rules of evidence is highly recommended for any professional engaged in or considering the cyber forensic investigations. When dealing or handling with the digital or electronic evidence, general forensic and procedural steps should also be applied. And what are these? That is, first is recognition and identification of the evidence. Next is documentation of the site of evidence collection. Next one is collection and preservation of the evidence. After that, the next point is you have to keep in mind is packaging and transportation of the evidence. So, all these are very important points that you should keep in mind. The courts may closely scrutinize actions which have the possibility of altering, damaging and destroying the original evidence. Within the legal system, such uncontrolled destruction of potential evidence is referred to as spoliation. Spoliation can be defined as the destruction or material alteration of evidence or the failure to preserve property for use by someone as evidence in pending or reasonably foreseeable litigation. Usually, the Locard's principle of mutual exchange is applied to scene of crime, wherein the perpetrators come in contact with the crime scene, and so he or she will both leave something onto the scene as well as bring on something from the crime scene. Every contact leaves a trace. So, you should keep this always in your mind. Cyber forensic investigation are no different. Managers have the responsibility of ensuring that the personnel under their direction are adequately trained and equipped to properly handle and protect any electronic evidence which may have been obtained as part of a cyber forensic investigation. to preserve the environment from which the electronic evidence was collected. So, both of these are very, very important. Ultimately, rules of evidence must be established and maintained, and chain of custody must be preserved for all evidence that may be potentially or eventually used in court. This chain in part ensures the integrity of the evidence. The professional and competent practice of cyber forensics, undertaken with full knowledge of existing associated laws pertaining to identification, collection, preservation, custody and transportation of electronic evidence, are critical to organizations competing and operating in this 21st century. Potential evidentiary values of electronic device, let us discuss now this point. Computers attached hard drives, external drives and other electronic devices found at a crime scene may contain information that can be useful as evidence in court of law. The devices themselves and the information they contain may be used as digital evidence. In this part, such devices will be recognized along with wide ranging information about their evidential value. Let us now discuss about the potential evidentiary value of a computer system. Dear students, you know a computer system and its component, they can be valuable evidence in an investigation. The hardware, software, the documents inside, the photos, the image files, the email and the various attachments in the email, the databases, the financial information, the internet browsing history, the chat logs, the buddy list, event logs and data saved on external devices and the recognized information connected with the computer system and machinery are all very potential evidences. Let us also talk about the potential evidentiary value of handheld devices. Handheld devices such as mobile phones, smartphones, PDAs, digital multimedia, audio and video devices, pagers, digital cameras and global positioning system GPS recipients may have software application, data and information like documents, mail messages, internet browsing history, chat logs, buddy list, photographs, image files, database, financial records, where the person has moved from this location to other. So, all these are very important evidences which are useful in an investigation or a prosecution. So, here the most important point to be noted is that in case where power is not maintained, there are chances that data or original digital evidences may be lost. Data or digital evidences on a number of devices such as mobile or smartphones can be overwritten or deleted though the device remains set in motion. Software is accessible from mobile and smartphones that can be activated vaguely to make the device unfeasible and make the data it as inaccessible if the phone is lost or stolen even from a remote place. So, these software can make a like outcome if activated on a device detained by law enforcement. First, responders are supposed to take safety measures to save the loss of data on devices they grab as evidence. Let us now talk about the potential evidentiary value of peripheral devices. The devices themselves and the functions they carry out or facilitate are all potential evidences. Information present on the device about its use is also evidence, such as incoming and outgoing phone and fax numbers, freshly scanned, faxed or printed documents and information about the purpose for and use of that particular device. In addition, These can be the sources of fingerprints, DNA and other identifiers which will be present on these devices which you can collect. Let us now talk about evidence collection. The investigating officer must have appropriate authority such as permission or a court order to look for and collect evidences at a digital crime scene or crime scene having these digital evidences. The investigating officer must be able to identify the authority under which he or she may seize evidence and should follow agency guidelines, consult a superior or contact a prosecutor if a question of appropriate authority arises. Digital evidence must be handled carefully to preserve the integrity of the physical device as well as the data it contains. Some digital evidence requires special collection, packaging and transportation techniques, and you should be aware about these. Data can be damaged or altered by electromagnetic fields such as those generated by static electricity, magnets, radio transmitters and other devices. Communication devices such as mobile phones, smartphones, PDAs and pagers should be secured and prevented from receiving or transmitting data once they are identified and collected as evidence. If data encryption is in use on a computer, data storage device or other electronic device and it is improperly powered off during digital evidence collection, the data it contains may become inaccessible. So, you should take care of this. Computers, components and devices, when we talk about these, to prevent the alteration of digital evidence during collection, investigating officers should first document any activity on the computer, components or devices, confirm the power state of the computer, whether it was switched on or switched off, in what situation, whether it will be better if you take the photographs also, check for flashing lights, running fans and other sounds that indicate the computer or electronic device is powered on. If the power state cannot be determined from these indicators, observe the monitor to determine if it is on or off or on a sleep mode. Next is you should be able to assess the situation. After identifying the computer's power status, follow the steps listed as we will discuss for the situation most like our own. That is, first, if the monitor is on, it displays a program, application, work product, picture, email or internet site on the screen. Photograph the screen and record the information displayed before you touch that. Proceed to if the computer is on. Second, if the monitor is on and a screen saver on picture is visible, then move the mouse slightly without depressing any buttons or rotating the wheel. Note any on-screen activity that causes the display to change to a login screen, work product or other visible display. Photograph the screen at this stage and record the information displayed. Proceed to if the computer is on. Come to the third point, the monitor is on, however, the display is blank as if the monitor is off. What you have to do is move the mouse slightly without depressing any buttons or rotating the wheel. The display will change from blank screen to a login screen, work product or other visible display. Note the change in the display and photograph the screen as earlier, record the information which has been displayed and further proceed to if the computer is on. Coming to the fourth point, the monitor is powered off, the display is blank. If the monitor's power switch is in the off position, then turn the monitor on. The display changes from a blank screen to a login screen, work product or other visible display. Note the change in the display and photograph the screen and the information displayed, and further proceed to if the computer is on. Next point in fourth can be the monitor is powered off and the display is blank. If the monitor's power switch is in the off position, turn the monitor on, the display does not change, it remains black or blank. Note that no change in the display occurs, then here also you have to take the photograph of the blank screen, record it and proceed to if the computer is off stage. Coming to the fifth point, the monitor is on, the display is blank. What you have to do is move the mouse slightly without depressing any buttons or rotating the wheel, wait for a response, and if the display does not change and the screen remains blank, confirm that power is being supplied to the monitor. If the display remains blank, check the computer case for active lights, listen for fans spinning or other indication that the computer is on, and if the screen remains blank and the computer case gives no indication that the system is powered on, proceed to the further stage where it is if the computer is off. Other forms of evidence are: be alert on the crime scene, look out for the pieces of papers with possible passwords, handwritten notes, blank pads of papers with impressions from prior writings, hardware and software manuals, calendars, literature and text or graphic materials printed from the computer that may reveal information relevant to the investigation. These forms of evidence also should be documented and preserved in compliance with departmental policies. Let us now discuss other electronic and peripheral devices of potential evidence value. Electronic devices which have been listed below may comprise information having evidentiary value in an investigation. Except in emergency situations, such devices should not be operated and the information they might contain should not be accessed directly. In cases of a situation where these devices need to be accessed and information contained in them, then all steps taken must be documented thoroughly. Data may be lost if a device is not properly handled or its data properly accessed. So, this you have to keep in mind. So, following are the examples which the first responders are required to collect as digital evidences in respect of electronic devices, components and peripherals. What are these? They are audio recorders, GPS accessories, answering machines, computer chips, pagers, cordless landline telephones, copy machines, cellular telephones, hard drive duplicators, facsimile or fax machines, printers, multifunction machines, that is printer, scanner, copier and fax, wireless access points, laptop power supplies and accessories, smart cards, video cassette recorders, that is VCRs, scanners, telephone caller ID units, personal computer memory card, international association card, that is PCMCIA cards or PDS. Dear students, special handling may be required to preserve the integrity and evidentiary value of these electronic devices. Securing of devices should be carried out by the investigating officer and assistance must be requested from the personnel who have advanced training in collecting digital evidence. Packaging, transporting and storage of digital evidence is the next topic that we will be now discussing. Digital evidence in the computers and electronic devices on which it is stored is fragile and sensitive to higher temperatures, moisture, physical fright, static, electricity and magnetic fields. The investigating officer should take precautions when documenting, photographing, packaging or transporting and storing these digital evidences to avoid altering, damaging or destroying of the data. Let us look at the packaging procedures that you have to keep in mind as a forensic scientist. When packing digital evidence for transportation, the investigating officer should ensure that all digital evidences collected are properly documented, labeled, marked, photographed, video recorded or sketched before it is packaged. All links and associated devices should be labeled for easy reconfiguration of the system later. You should also keep in mind that digital evidences may also enclose latent, trace or biological evidences, and therefore, suitable steps should be taken to preserve it, like using gloves. Digital evidence imaging is supposed to be completed before latent, trace or biological evidence progression is being carried out on the evidence. Next point you have to keep in mind is pack all the digital evidences in anti-static wrapping. Only those paper bags and envelopes, cardboard boxes and anti-static containers should be used for packaging digital evidence. Next point which has to be kept in mind is plastic equipment should not be used when gathering digital evidence, since plastic can generate static electricity and let the moisture and condensation develop, and this in turn may spoil or ruin the evidence. Next point you have to keep in mind is make sure that all digital evidence is tied together in a way that will avert it from being turned, dented or otherwise deformed. Label all the containers used to package and store digital evidences clearly and properly. Regarding the cellular, mobile or smartphones, leave the cellular, mobile or smartphones in the power state on or off in which they were found. Next point is pack the mobile or smartphone in the signal blocking object such as Faraday separation bags, broadcasting frequency shielding material or aluminum foil to avoid the data messages from being sent or received by other devices. Investigating officers should be conscious that if unsuitably packaged or detached from protected covering, the device may become capable to send and receive data messages if it is in the range of a communication signal, and it can be remotely changed. Another point as investigating officer you have to keep in mind is gather all power supply and adapters for all electronic devices seized. After this we discuss the transportation procedures. Once we have collected the evidence, let us see how they have to be transported. When transporting the digital evidence, the investigating officer should keep the following points in mind, that is, first of all, keep the digital evidence away from magnetic fields such as those produced by radio transmitters, speaker magnets and magnetic mount emergency lights. Other potential hazards that the first responder should be conscious of is comprise seats, heater and any device or matter that can generate static electricity. Next point is keep away from maintenance of digital evidence in a vehicle for extended period of time. Next point you have to keep in mind is heat, cold and humidity can spoil or ruin the digital evidence. Yet another point is ensure that computers and electronic devices are packaged and secured during transportation to prevent damage from shock and vibration. Another very important thing is document the transportation of the digital evidence and maintain the chain of custody on all the evidence which is being transported. Let us now look for the storage procedures. Once we have transported, then how to store. When storing the digital evidence, the investigating officer should keep in mind these points. First is ensure that the digital evidence is stored in a secure, climate controlled environment or a place that is not subjected to high temperature or humidity. Next one is ensure that the digital evidence is not exposed to magnetic fields, moisture, dust, vibration or any other element that may spoil or ruin it. If more than one computer is detained as evidence, all computers, cables and devices linked to them should be appropriately labeled to make possible reassembly if necessary in the forensic lab. Subsequently, seized computers can be labeled in alphabetical order. The corresponding connections and cables can be labeled with letter designations for the computer and a unique number to ensure proper reassembly can be done. Introduction to toxicological evidences, that is post-mortem. For a proper investigation of any case related to poisoning, it is imperative to follow certain protocols to collect and preserve the exhibits for further analysis and opinion. It is vital to collect and preserve the pertinent material in the correct way and should preferably be kept in cold storage. It depends upon the history of poisoning and its distribution among various tissues and organs as to which type of visceral tissue must be preserved for the purpose of chemical analysis. The detection and distribution of a poison or drug in a different body, fluid and tissue is of prodigious significance because there are various routes of entry of poisons into the body. The poison might have passed from one organ and have been introduced into another organ like stomach after death to make a homicidal act. Furthermore, after death, the supply of energy from metabolic processes is affectedly reduced. The integrity of the different parts within the body breaks down at different rates. Complex molecules are likely to break down into their simpler subunits and moves down the concentration gradient that was maintained at the time of life by the expenditure of metabolic energy. So, apparently these processes do not occur at once and consequently for a variable length of time after death, the analysis of appropriate sample may yield useful information about the metabolic state of the poison in the period just before death. Once death takes place, many drugs are released from their binding sites in tissues at the pH decreases on death and as the process of autolysis progress. These phenomena can make the understanding of drug concentration after death less than straightforward, and preferably the decision to take the viscera sample for toxicological and biochemical analysis should be made before conducting the post-mortem examination by reviewing the police report, death report and the treatment report. In the cases where causes of death is not apparent at post-mortem, it becomes necessary to take tissue samples for toxicological analysis. Let us now discuss the post-mortem findings in the case of poisoning. Poisoning cases being invariably medico-legal in nature, if the patient dies, an inquest will have to be done followed by post-mortem examination by a forensic pathologist, and this is for the purpose of ascertaining the circumstances in which poisoning may have occurred and to establish the precise cause and manner of death. The common procedure of examination is the same as for any medico-legal autopsy, with individual attention being paid to those characteristics which can give a clue to the detection and identification of the poison involved. The contents of the stomach should be thoroughly examined for any traces of poison and also for any distinguishable odor. In case of poisoning, a peculiar smell will be observed on the opening of the body. The substances detectable by their smell are alcohol, cyanide, carbolic acid, petroleum products, camphor, nicotine, opium, paraldehyde, phosphorus, insecticides and pesticides, etc. Apart from that, the presence of any foreign material in the form of powder, capsules, tablets, leaves or seeds in the stomach will also give you clue. There will be laryngeal oedema commonly present in death due to alcohol and barbiturates. Acute lung congestion and edema will be detected. Acute swelling of brain with or without a pressure cone may be present on the opening of cranial cavity. The urinary bladder will generally be distended. Intravascular sickling may be observed, and most frequently no signs of trauma or disease in any organ may be visible. Body may decompose faster as compared to the normal conditions of decomposition. The pupils may be dilated or constricted. So, all these you have to be very vigilant when you are doing this post-mortem. Now, let us talk about the identification and collection. Identification for the purpose of toxicological analysis. What has to be done? In biological materials, that is viscera, stomach contents, urine, isolation is carried out by the process of acid distillation. The distillate obtained thereof from this process is subjected to various tests for identification of different toxins. In acid distillation, about 50 to 100 grams of the visceral sample, stomach contents, vomits and other materials to be examined are taken separately and brought to a consistency by addition of 3 to 5 ml of distilled water. It is then acidified with tartaric or sulfuric acid and subjected to steam distillation. Proper cooling environment should be provided for the condenser and receiving flask with the outlet of the condenser dipped in NaOH solution or water or any other reagent as found suitable. The distillate is then collected in 4 to 5 fractions, with the first fraction being of around 20 milliliters and the subsequent collection in volume of 50 ml each. The flask comprising of the material should preferably be heated in water bath. The distillate will contain different compounds for which specific tests are required for the purpose of their identification. Collection of toxicological exhibits, let us see how it will be done. First, for survival cases, following materials may be collected for analysis, that is stomach wash, vomited material and stained clothes, blood sample, urine and feces if they are available. For the suspected material recovered from the possession of the victim or accused and from the scene of crime like food or drink, residual poisonous material, all that needs to be collected. Talking about fatal cases. In the case of fatal cases, following samples must be preserved for further toxicological analysis, that is stomach and whole of its content or stomach wash either is available and 1 feet of proximal part of small intestine along with its content. Preservation, packaging, handling and labeling of these post-mortem exhibits. First is the preservation of exhibits. Alcohol is the most suitable preservative for preservation of portions of viscera, except in those cases in which poisoning has been caused by alcohol and phenol, where instead of alcohol a saturated solution of common salt should be used. Preservation by alcohol, how it is done? The tissues are taken into the container and to it is added adequate quantity of alcohol, so that whole of the tissues are dipped inside the liquid. Preservation by saturated solution of common salt, how it is done? The tissue that are to be examined are placed in a container and suitable amount of saturated solution of common salt is added. The tissues are immersed in such a way that some excess quantity of the undissolved salt is present at the bottom. Next we talk about preservation by solid common salt. Powdered common salt may also be used for preservation of the post-mortem tissues. The tissues are placed in a container and appropriate amount of solid common salt is added, such that the tissues get immersed in the salt well. The tissues are taken into the container and to it sufficient solid common salt is added and the tissues are immersed well with the salt. For the analysis to exclude any presence of poison, sample of solid common salt or saturated solution of it or the alcohol sample used for the purpose of preservation must also be collected and sent in separate glass jar. Let us now look at the preservation for blood sample. For preservation of blood sample, any of these preservation techniques may be used, that is sodium fluoride 20 mg for each ml of blood, 5 mg of sodium citrate and 0.1 mg of mercuric chloride for each ml of the blood. What are the points to be followed while preserving the viscera? They are: the viscera are preserved in saturated solution of common salt and rectified spirit. The rectified spirit is not to be used in poisoning due to alcohol, acetic acid, phenol, phosphorus and paraldehyde, where saturated solution of sodium chloride will be used. Formaldehyde should not be used as a preservative because it makes the extraction of poisons difficult. Stomach and intestine are kept together in a glass jar and in another jar piece of liver, kidney and spleen are to be preserved. Blood and urine are preserved separately in two different glass bottles. Rubber insert should not be used as it extracts some poisons like chloroform and phenols. Another point you have to keep in mind is quantity of preservative should be equal to the bulk of the organ. Only 2/3 of the bottle should be filled, allowing the space for decomposition gases. Bottles should be properly sealed and well labelled, bearing the name of the deceased, post-mortem number, date and name of the police station. Sample of the preservative used, that is 100 ml of spirit or 25 gram of sodium chloride, should be sent to the lab to rule out the contamination. Next point you have to keep in mind, a copy of the post-mortem report should also be sent along with the viscera. A sample of seal should be sent along with the viscera. Viscera along with the sample of preservative and sample of seal should be handed over to the police. Packaging, handling and labeling of exhibits. In medico legal cases, proper sealing of the exhibit shows utmost important role, and for this reason the exhibit sent to the laboratory for analysis must be appropriately sealed. Care must be taken that no tampering should be possible without breaking, tempering or removing the seal impressions. The glass bottles containing portions of viscera and or other materials should be sealed in the presence of the authorized official, and these bottles in turn should be packed properly in some wooden box having sufficient packaging materials so as to check the breakage of the bottles during transit. These wooden boxes should again be sealed with authorized seal samples. Other articles should also be separately packed, sealed, and then all such sealed packets should be repacked in one parcel and then finally sealed by the authorized official. These parcels and boxes etc. should always contain a label showing the description of the contents. The sample of the specimen seal affixed on the packets, bundles, bottles and Viscera bottles etc. should also be sent in separate cover to enable the comparison of seal impressions found attached on the parcels received. For the purpose of forwarding the properly packed and sealed evidences, it should be labeled with deceased name, post-mortem number, nature of sample, collection site, preservation used, date and time of collection, and specific attention should be paid to proper packaging of the sample such that there is no loss of evidence during transportation. In addition to it, proper documents need to be enclosed along with the sample bearing name, address and phone number of forensic pathologist and investigating officer. Further, the circumstances of death and details of drugs thought to be implicated should also be documented, along with the past medical history including current or recent prescription medication. All other details like details of emergency hospital treatment and medical treatment given or medication given, copy of the forensic pathologist report if available, all these should be documented along with this. Let us now look at the conclusion in this module, that is, let us summarize what we have learnt. We have learned that electronic and digital evidences are of utmost importance and needs to be handled properly, and same within any other form for evidence. For this reason, the search and seizure process carried out should be properly documented. If we talk about the toxicological evidences, there also proper collection in suitable reagents are required so as to make sure that the particular preservative does not readily react with the sample, thereby diminishing its evidentiary value. With all these information, we come to the end of today's lecture. So, do keep in mind what we discussed today, they are very important points as a forensic scientist for you, and I will be back with one more lecture in this series. And if you want to learn more and enhance your knowledge, you may log on to our website, which is www.cec.nic.in. For multiple choice questions, quizzes, LORs etc., you can log in here, and thank you for your time today. We will see you in the next lecture. Have a great day. Thank you.